Hi, I'm Meredith from Just Shining, and today I'm going to demonstrate the making of a small velvet cat with an embroidered collar. The sewing pattern for this cat has been listed in my Etsy store, Just Shining. I have included the link in the description below. The pattern is available as a PDF download. If you have any questions or difficulties with the printed instructions or this video, please feel free to comment below and I'll do my best to answer you. Over the next few weeks, I plan to list a few more patterns for cats and hopefully some accompanying video instructions. I'll also add some links for the supplies. These will not necessarily be the exact places where I purchased my tools and supplies from, as most of my items I've had for many years, and of course I've forgotten it. So first of all, scissors, fabric scissors, some little ones are sometimes handy. Now there's a few optional items that I've thrown in through here. You don't have to have them, but they can be useful. These are Hemostats, really good for stuffing, turning little sewn items through, handy to have. Needle nose pliers. When we're using the large darner, sometimes it's difficult to get through some of the fabrics. Once the tip's through, pull them through with your pliers. The other thing is an awl. Now this, you could use a leather punch. I've got a sewing awl. My leather punch is a little bit dull, so I'm using that at the moment. Quick unpick could be handy. Pretty good for pulling out our tacking threads we may be putting in at spots or emergencies if you do something wrong. A black lead pencil. I've got a 2B. The other thing we have here is a Pilot friction pen. Now I use this as a marking pen on my fabrics because it can be removed, the marks can be removed with an iron or with heat. Now I'm only using this on the reverse of the fabric. They come in all sorts of colours, so quite a useful little tool. Or alternatively, there are air soluble and water soluble markers, usually come from a fabric store. Hand needles, this is a size 8 krill needle, just for a little bit of tacking we do, and we go and sewing up the stuffing hole. So those ones, 8 or 10, whatever suits you best or whatever you've got. The other one is a long needle. This is a long darner. What I'm looking for is a longer needle with a larger eye than your krill needle, because we're actually going to thread some fine wire through that. So they're, I think, really handy. If you're going to use a label on your cats, I've got little labels there to go through. Zipper foot. Now this is handy on the sewing machine when we're going to do a little bit of top stitching on the outside of the cat, and it means you can get very close to where you've stuffed some items. If you use an ordinary presser foot, there's too much room pushing away your stuffing. I'll come up to here, and you've got this much room, generally around about 1/4 of an inch, 6 mil, that sort of area from where your stuffing is. But with this one here, your needle goes right down this side of it, so you can get very, very close to where the stuffing is. So that's a very handy one to have. Most sewing machines would come with that as a standard item. Now threads, to match your velvet fabric we're going to use for your sewing machine, so thread and bobbin. I also use a thicker thread, this is a buttonhole or top stitch thread. Now this I use for some shaping of toes on the outside and for also sewing up the stuffing hole. A bright contrasting colour. This is just used for tacking. You're going to remove it, so the brighter it is and more contrast you've got to your fabric colour, the easier it is to show up when you're pulling it out. So I just use up my ones I don't use very often in my stash of threads. So now we've got embroidery threads for the mouth. You could also use crochet cotton, which this one's a size 8. That's handy to have, but ordinary embroidery, cotton floss. Now if you're going to be embroidering his little collar by hand, obviously in some various colours in a pattern you'd like to use, that's pretty good. Now washers. I've got this little washer. It's actually called a drain plug seal, but I just was looking for the size. I wanted something perfectly round, and it's just to draw around the eyes, so you've got a really nice round shape, and being metal doesn't lose its shape. You could of course use tops of bottles or thread bottoms. They're good. So just something to draw a circle around about 1/2 inch, a little bit more across. So that's that one. Glues. Now these are may or may not need them through there. I use a tacky glue. If I'm going to use a leather punch to make a hole in the fabric, I just run a little bead of tacky glue around the outside, let it dry. It stops the fabric from running. Probably a low risk of that, but I always put them on. If we're going to use glass eyes, not safety eyes, a gemstone glue. And we've got whiskers. So for the whiskers, I'll use a 32 gauge wire, generally in the jewellery section of your craft. I can't even find at the end of it, in your craft store. So it's a very fine wire, and that's great. Comes in lots of different colours. But with the white, I find in the jewellery, it's generally got a copper centre piece. So when you cut them, you can actually see the different colour when it's white. So if I'm going to use white whiskers, this is actually electronic wire. Probably the same gauge, 32. Hasn't got a tag on it, unfortunately. But places like Amazon or even your AliExpress or Temu will have some of this sort of stuff. So it's actually comes under electronic wire, and get a nice fine one. Either or, I've just got black and white, and it covers most of the cats I'm going to do. Just some general sewing supplies. You might find clips useful, or pins. A lot of stuff using, especially when you're using velvet or something that's a bit stuffed. The clips are actually more useful than the pins, but whatever suits you. Just your normal supplies. Might need a ruler at some point. Now, of course, we'll need the pattern. Now, this is, like I said, downloadable. Now, with the pattern, I'll either make up, you can use it, cut it straight out from here and use it as a paper pattern and pin it on. Now, these lines are actually the sewing lines, which when you put them on, you can trace around it and use that as your sewing line. But remember when you're cutting out to leave your seam allowance. I tend to use my presser foot width for my seam allowance. So you work out what your presser foot width is. I think this one on this presser foot's about 6 mil. So I would, use a 6 mil out from this sewing line and when I'm cutting round. So instead of using paper, especially if I'm going to do a few of them, I would either make your pattern on light cardstock, easier to trace around, a little bit more sturdy. Or your other option, which is even more sturdy, would be to use tracing plastic. So this is really good, doesn't get, and really easy to trace around. And as you can see here, what I've done with my washers, to get a perfect circle round for the eyes that I want to trace, I've actually glued the washers on and cut out behind. So that's not necessary, you could just cut them out and draw around there. Or just use your washer, but I just tried that for patterns made from this, they're going to last you a long time. And it comes in, the piece I've got comes in little A4 sheets, and I got that one from Spotlight. Obviously it's going to be available in all sorts of things, so it's just called template plastic. Very useful thing to have. The other thing you could use, especially if you've got larger pattern pieces that you want to use, there's this acetate. It's plastic, same sort of go, a little bit shinier and stuff, but you can just trace around your patterns very easily and cut out with that. So it's got a protective film on it and keeps your patterns very nice. So then we will need, if you're going to make these for a child, you will need to use a safety eye. So this is just a choice, a few of the choices. Obviously it's larger than that. So I've got some glass eyes through here, and all these are safety eyes. I'm using around about an 18 mil, but it depends on what you want your cat to be. These ones were just on a glass eye, and so your different sizes. They can also look fine in just a plain black because you're doing a colour behind in the eye. So I'd say they're about an 18 on it. Yep, an 18 mil safety eye, which that sort of thing. I use safety noses, different sorts here for the cat we'll be using today, because I'm going to use a cream colour so it shows up well in the sewing. I use this little pink nose. You can get little flock covered ones, and these are safety noses. They have a stem on them, like so, with a little locking washer, and they pass the standards for children's toys. So if you're going to make a children's toy, make sure you're using a safety eye and a safety nose. You could also embroider the nose, which then there's not the issue. The other requirement, we need a little jump ring. This one here, that's about a 10mm. This is for making our nose whiskers, or our whiskers. So yeah, a little one of those. I also use a little bit of masking tape on that washer, just where the joint is. So it doesn't matter what sort of tape, bit of washi tape, bit of masking tape. It's only a little slither of tape off the end there, just to stop the wire from slipping out that joint hole, because the wire is very fine. And then, of course, stuffing, just a polyester fibre fill. And that should basically be the tools and supplies. Now we'll look at the fabric. So what I've got here, I'm going to use a velvet fabric, and this is just a cream. You'll need a piece width about 35 centimetres by the width of the fabric, and that will give you a little bit of excess. You could easily make 3 cats, could even be 4. I've never measured it out of a metre, but definitely you'd make 3. So we need that. We need a piece of that's heavy duty iron-on interfacing. Now you could use light duty, but I think the heavy duty is easier because it's thicker, and it gives you a nice edge. We're going to actually, on a couple of things, fold over the edge. So that gives you an easy, if it's too lightweight, when you're folding over, you could fold anywhere. So that just keeps your folds nice and neat. So a piece of interfacing, about 25, this is bigger, 25 centimetres by 25 centimetres. We'll need the background eye colour, this colour through the back here. I usually use a piece of silk, some taffeta, some bem silk, so something with a fairly strong colour, and a bit of sheen looks nice. So in these sorts of fabrics, usually you get some fairly good colours, so just go if you like, choose the colour you like. For eyes, not important what colour. We want some ear linings, these ones here. So you can either do the similar colour to the fabric. You could go a little bit pinker or natural colour, and that's only a small piece. We only need a piece 10 centimetres by 20 centimetres would be fine. So that's for our ear linings. You could use, as I'm using this cream here, something very similar in colour, a little bit of contrast. Or today, what I think I'll do, just for something different, I'm actually going to use some floral fabric for his ear linings. So I'm putting it on there. So I'm going to use that today. So once again, you only need a small piece of fabric, 20 by 10. And one more, we need some eye rims, which are these. I've got them in the darker grey. So you can either do them in a similar colour to your body fabric. So that's just a toning in colour, or you can make it a little bit of a contrast, like a big contrast like I've done here. So I've chosen, I think I'll use this one today, or when I get to it I might even use that one, not sure yet. But a little piece of cotton, or that's actually a piece of silk, something lightweight anyway. You don't want thick fabric here, quite a lightweight fabric. Once again, 20 centimetres by 10 is sufficient. So that's all for our fabrics. We'll come back in a moment. I'll clear the decks here and we'll start with the cutting out. So by using our velvet fabric, now velvet fabric has a nap, so pat it and feel which way up and down is. If you pat the wrong way, you'll feel it. So what I do is on the back of the fabric, to me, this one's down, that's the smooth. I'll mark an arrow. So because we're going to do everything from the wrong side with the cutting out. So at least I'll remember which is which. Now, wrapping your pattern, I'm going to use the clear plastic today because I've actually decided I'm going to have embroidery on his tummy, and it makes the placement a whole lot easier if it's clear. So I'm going to place him about there, remembering I need to have a seam allowance around there, so I've got just enough around a seam allowance. Now the black on this pale fabric, the black lead will show up just fine. If you're on a different colour fabric, you may use, this is where your pen will come in. You could use this, obviously in whatever colour you choose to show up, and they makes it nice and easy to see. And these will be our sewing lines. So we need one front. I'll go back around there, and we'll need his eyes done. And these washes make it so it's a nice, and I've got a little mark for his nose. Not so important, you can do that by eye later. So one of these, we need the back. I'll do this on the single fabric because all it means is I'll flip it over. You could double your fabric at this point, leaving enough room there beside for your 2 lots of seam allowances. We don't want to forget those. I've marked on the patterns the way the nap goes, the lay of the fur or the fabric. Oops. On this one, I've actually marked, that's the cutting line. And little notch for his tail, where his tail fits. Now, as I'm doing this on a single layer of fabric, you will need to flip this over so you've got a pair. Remembering we've actually drawn the seam allowance on here, so they could actually butt right up to each other if you wanted. That would be fine. But I'll just go around here like so. So with those, the rest of the pattern pieces I'll be cutting double, so I might actually cut up there and get that out of the way for the minute. Those over there. Now, you fold your fabric in half. There should be more than enough fabric. It's actually excess, and it wasn't quite the width of the fabric here either. I had a bit cut off there. So this will give us 2 pieces now. We've got this doubled, so we'll need 2 of those. So wrong side facing out, so you can draw on it. And these are the sewing lines, remember? So and on my pattern here, this is where the elbow is. So I've actually got to cut a hole in my template, so I can draw that along there. So we want 2 of these, leaving enough room for the seam allowance around, so don't bump them up hard against each other. And I didn't draw the nap of the fabric on these pattern pieces, but it does on this particular one, I've noticed, but it does go down. Just think of which way you'd pat a cat. I'll mark these on there. Got 2 of those. We need 2 of these, the front ones. And I don't do an elbow or a knee on those because they're only quite small. So once again, make sure you leave enough around the bottom there. And this is quicker than pinning on and cutting round. So that's those. We don't need tail. So you don't actually even have to cut those ones out at this point. The front and the back, yes, we'll cut out, but we'll leave these. We can sew these just on one piece and cut out in the end, so you've only got one trim. If you're going to do that, what we're going to do is take those over the sewing machine and sew around on these, leaving the tops of each of them open. So these will be left open from there to there, all left open. And to stop your fabric moving, shouldn't do anyway, but you could put, just grab a couple of pins in at your extremities and get. And if we sew around on this line, and then when we finish sewing, we're going to trim around and cut them all out together. So I'll take that over to the sewing machine and sew all around those at the moment. These ones here, we're going to just cut around, leaving the seam allowance. So the other one we need to do, I'll look at that later, is now cut out the pieces we want for interfacing. So grab your piece of heavy duty for interfacing, and on the non-iron-on side, the bit that's not shiny, so shiny side down, we're going to grab the 3 pieces we need interfacing for a collar, the ear, and the eye colour band. They don't shop so well in that. I'll might show you in the cardboard, easier to see. So we've got the colour band, the ear, and the collar. So once again, it doesn't matter if you use your pencil or your heat pen. As soon as you wind these onto the fabric, that pen marking is going to disappear. So just trace around these. Now with your ear, you will need a copy, so you need to swap him over so you've got a pair. So flip it over. You need a left and a right ear, so that will give you a pair. And our eye band colour. Okay, so now we cut those out to that line we've just drawn. We don't need to worry about seam allowances or anything on here, so cut out to that line. So cutting all these out, and then we're going to put them on the 3 different fabrics here we've got to look at. For the collar, you would use your velvet fabric. I've got one here I've put on there, so we just put this on, iron it on to the velvet fabric, then we'll go and cut the velvet fabric out, and we need to leave a seam allowance at the bottom and the top, not at the sides. These are actually a little bit wider than needed, and they're trimmed after it's sewn onto the cat. So that would be your collar, looks like that. We've got an eye band. Now this is where you choose your bright colour fabric, which is your eye colour. Iron that onto that fellow, and then we're going to cut out right under the line. So this is cut out exactly on the line. So once again, this is actually made a little bit oversized and trims, and it's trimmed after it's sewn onto the cat. So then we've got, that's our eye colour. And now the other thing we need, our ears. Depending on what, so you iron that onto your ear colour fabric. And then we're going to cut that out, and we're going to leave a fold over on the bottom of the ear. So on the long edge, the straighter of the 3 edges, we're going to cut out right on the line here on these 2 sides and leave a turn over this side. I'm actually going to use the floral fabric for that. So I've ironed that on there. So I iron my ears onto that, and I'll be cutting out, leaving a tail at a hem at the bottom side. And what we're going to do here is we will tack those. So using a nice bright colour thread, so it's easy to remove, because all this tacking thread will be removed after we've sewn it on. So just put it, not in it, this doesn't have to be neat or anything like that, just got to hold it down in place till we sew it on. So fold this over, and being cotton, you can get that fold line nice and neat, and it will fold up. If you use a heavyweight interfacing, folding up to this line, this cut line here, is very easy. If you use lightweight, it's too easy to fold that lightweight over on itself. So leave your knot on the outside, because that's the way it will be, removing it from the outside. So we'll just tack along the bottoms of these, so, like so. If you tack away from the edge, when we top sew this, we're going to sew close to the edge. So to keep it away from your machine stitching will be nice and close to the edge here. Keep your tacking threads a bit away. Just makes it easier for them to pull out later. So doesn't need to be flash, just to keep that hem down. So that's what you're looking for, 2 little ears like so. So we'll go away and do that. And on this one here, on the collar, what we're going to do, the same thing, we're going to fold both of these over and tack along. So these both get folded over. On this, the top edge, it's a little, you need to put a little, few little notches in here to make it fold smoothly and lay flat. Not cutting it all, make sure you don't cut over that line. And same thing, we're going to tack along, so we've got 2 hems, top and bottom. So we're going to tack along there. Keep your tacking away from the edge, because once again we'll be moving that. And it will look like, when you've done that, look like so. And this is the point where you can do your embroidery. Now you may choose to do some hand embroidery. I'm not going to give you a design, just something you like. There's plenty of videos on YouTube to do little simple flowers, leaves, whatever. So something across here, choose that. Or you could do machine embroidery, and we won't go into that either. That one's a machine embroidered one. So we'd do that before it was cut out. You do that when you've got it in a whole piece, and people that do machine embroidery would know what they're doing there. So that one's machine embroidered, and I've cut that out afterwards. But still the same principle. You cut it out to this and tack down your 2 little hems. So now that's your collar. So I've done some embroidery on that one already, so that one's ready to go. And so that's it for those ones. We'll cut those out in a moment. And the back and front here will be cut out, remembering your seam allowance. So like so. Do the rest of that off camera. So then, if we do that one, go away and sew all the arms, legs and tail, which is around here. I shall sew around those, and we'll come back and look at the next steps. Now we're going to do the eye rims. So take your eye rim fabric. Now this is where we're going to do around this darker grey here. So we're going to do those now. So if we take your, what colour you've chosen for that, I'm going to have a bit of a contrast and cut that piece in 2. Just up that way in half. So with the right side on here, centre, well, roughly centre up, that we'll do one at a time, putting that there. We are now going to sew around on this pink line round here. We'll do one at a time because we want a little bit extra here. So you could do it together. So now I'm going to sew around this one. I'll do that, come back and show you that. We'll do one. Now we've sewn around the eye rim on just one at the moment. And what we're going to do here, so we've sewn around on our pink, is we're going to trim. It's usually best to do it from this side because this being a little bit lightweight fabric and flimsy, you can get it caught and cut the bit you don't want. So we're going to trim this close to the stitching without going through it, maybe a mil away, or just a whisker. So we'll go around there and trim this. Try and make it relatively even here at this point. That your seam allowance on this one. A little bit fidgety. Take your time so you don't cut the wrong bits. I really want to cut this. You might find small scissors are more useful. So that's what we're looking for. So we're cutting that out close to your stitching. And now we're going to take all this and push it through the hole. This is excess, too large, and it's fine. It's easier to work with a bigger piece and trim back than try and do something too small. So that will then make our rim. Now the best way to do this now would be to hand tack that around and just you turn a little bit at a time so you've got a nice even little lid or eye rim. Tacking again, and the next machine stitching we're going to do will be in this ridge in here, so try and keep your tacking away from there, and that's why a larger piece of the fabric for the eye is helpful because it gives you plenty to work with. And so once again we're going to tack that all the way around to keep that down. And as you go, just smooth out that. There's really no need to do any notching or anything in there if you get some nice lightweight fabric for these eye rims. And a little bit of, doesn't matter if it folds up a little bit. You just want a nice shape around here. So we're going to go all the way around like that one. And then what I'll do the other eye. So this will then be on this side out of the way and just do exactly the same thing. Put that on there, sew around, clip, turn it through and tack down. So we'll have two little eyes like so. So I'll go away and do that one. Now when you're sewing around these, use a smaller stitch than normal. I think my sewing machine defaults to about 2.4 for its ordinary length stitch. So I usually turn that down to about 1.8. So it's a nice little stitch, just gets around those corners a lot nicer than if the longer the stitch, the more jagged it's going to be, too straight. So a little stitch, which of course then makes it very difficult if you need to unpick it. So take your time and go really slowly with that bit so you do get a nice, smooth, round shape when you're sewing. So we'll go right way and do that and come back for when that's done. What I've forgot to mention, we will get it pussycat out of the way here, is across these little lines on the longer of the legs, I'm actually going to put a little bit of a tacking thread across there. It's just to line shop later. I only want you to do it on one layer, so just put your hand through and just sew across here because you want to be able to see it from the outside, and that marking, of course, is only seen on the inside. So just as simple as that. Before we grab another threaded needle here, so I've run out of tangled, great. Well, I mean, this isn't absolutely necessary, but it does make life a little bit easier later. in one of the next steps. So just through the one layer. Then we'll go back and continue to sew around these. I've already sewn around these ones here, so I'll just go back and sew around those. Before we do that, I'll show you the eyes. Now, these were the two pads we sewed on the eyes. Now this is going to get in the way here, so what we want to do is trim these back a little bit. Doesn't have to be neat. Just like, don't do it too close. Bit of excess around there's fine. It's just this middle bit you don't want crossing over to show through the other eye. So as long as they don't come over into the eye hole, that's fine. The rest of it doesn't even need to be cut off, but as I've started, I'll keep going. So that's what we want here. What we're going to do is get our eye band colour and put this over here. And once again, this is what we're going to do is sew right in this stitch here around the eye rim and sew around here, and that'll give you the eye colour at the back. At the same time, the ears, the ear lining I'm going to do in this floral. I'll put those on there, and we're going to top stitch close to this edge along here on both sides. So I'll come back and do those, finish doing the sewing around the longer legs, and we'll finish his face then. So it won't be a moment and I'll be back. So now we've got the eyelids sewed down to the eye band colour and the ears sewn on. So we can now remove these tacking threads. Look, when I sewed the eyelids round, I left the tails. I didn't back stitch. It's neater not to. So what you can do is pull these threads through to the back and tie them off. So this is where your quick unpick might come in useful, or a little needle, pin, whatever. And if you really struggle to pull them through, just thread them up onto a needle and thread them through there. But there we go there. And the other one. So I'll just tie those off knock those off. And you don't need to cut this very short. It's all going to be on the inside, so it won't be seen. So just tie a few knots off there. It's a lot neater than doing back stitching, or at that point. Don't have to chop them too short. That way the risk of them coming undone is fairly minimal. That's one. This one here. Sometimes they come through very quickly and sometimes they don't. Now next we're going to put the eyes and nose in and whiskers on. So we need to decide where they're going. We can pull these out. They can all go. And this is where, if they get caught under your stitching, the bright thread's a lot easier to see and minimal risk if you're pulling at the stitching you want to stay, the machine stitching you want to leave there. And the ear ones can come out. A bit caught there. So it's a bit flat. So they're all good to go. So now I've decided, instead of using a patterned eye, I'm just going to use a plain black one. So decide where I want to put him. I'm going to have mine looking up, and I'm going to mark. We get our marking pen again. So about there. And make sure that they're in the same spot in the quadrant of the eye. And you don't want it over here, wherever. So both in the same spot of the eye. And we get our sewing awl or your leather punch at this point. So this isn't quite big enough for the, sometimes I'll push it through a couple of times. And make him catch around the eyelid. And these ones we can put our nuts on, or lock washers. Make sure they're pushed right down. And the same with the other one. Now if you use a leather punch, I actually run a bead of tacky glue, any sort of glue, just run a bead of it round. If that was a leather punch hole, I would run a bead of glue around the outside of the hole to stop that fabric fraying out. It should be fine underneath the eye and washer, but just it doesn't hurt. And just let that dry off before you go to this stage. So, like I said, it should be fine, but one little extra step won't hurt. There. Now, nose-wise, I'm going to put his nose halfway between here and probably around about there. Now, this one is a thicker post on there, so I'll just test that through. Leather. Oops. So next we're going to make the whiskers. I actually might hold that off till we do that on. So what we need to do is take your little jump ring, and there's a little join in that. So the wire we're going to use is very fine. So to save that wire, slipping out the hole shouldn't do because it will be under a washer. But cut yourself a little bit of tape and over the join hole, just cover that up and wrap it round. Now this is going to be on the inside, won't be seen, so it's fine. It just stopping that wire going through that hole. What you could use is a little dab of super glue over the hole. Hey, and if anyone had solder, you could solder it. It's absolutely unnecessary, but there you go. Now, taking your, I'm going to use the white electrical wire on this little pussycat, I think. Or maybe, no, look, I'm going to try black whiskers. Just so you can see it, because I've already, now cut 6 of these around about 20 centimetres long. So you're going to do them about that long. Fold them in half. Put the folded end into the loop, into the jump ring, and then the tails through the loop. And pull tight. So you're going to do 6 of those, like so. Now, I've actually prepared one already, somewhere. And actually it is white whiskers. So I've put 6 of those on. Now don't worry about the length, we're going to trim those later, so they're better off to be too long than too short. So put them on there, like so. So we've got one there ready to go. So, looking at that, we'll come back in a moment. Now we put the nose post through roughly straighten him up to how he should be, not upside down. Make sure that fabric's pushed right to the bottom of the post hole. Now we're not going to put the washer on yet. We're going to take these whiskers and we're going to stick those on there and then get our washer and push that on. Now if you decide you want to embroider your nose to get your and your whiskers or whatever, and still want to use these sorts of whiskers, because we've got this eye band colour here, you could actually hand stitch that little jump ring just onto the eye colour, not onto the body fabric, so just through here. So you could still use these sorts of whiskers. Now we're going to pull these whiskers through to the front. So what I'm going to do, now we did 6 doubled, so we've actually got 6 whiskers each side. So I'm going to make 6 marks where I want the whiskers to come through. Now this is, our eye rim is round here, so obviously we don't want it through there. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I'll do 6 whiskers there and round the other side, roughly the same spot. Although 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. All right, now this is where we get our long darner, like so. And one by one we'll take these whiskers and thread them through. This is why you want a little bit larger eye than normal. Thread them through, spin them over a little bit and go through each of those dots. With the electric wire it can pop out a little bit. The other wire doesn't. Just pull them through one by one through to the other side. So, next fellow. Oops. And if at any point that's a little bit hard to pull through, what you could do is get your needle nose pliers, make sure that wire's still through the eye hole, and it does help you pull that through. So I'll go back and do the other 10, and we'll come back to that one in a moment. But what we can do, now we've sewn all the legs and tail around. So now you need to cut these out. Just saves one step. And I have back stitched at the start and the end. So I'll just grab the tail for now. Oops. This way you're only cutting out once, not cutting, sewing, trimming, cutting again. So cut everything out like so. This is where hemostats can come in handy. You can either push that through just like an ordinary pokey stick, push it through that way, or oops, grab the end, although maybe if I unlock them it would help. Grab the end of the fabric and just pull these through. Now with the tail, I'm not going to put any stuffing in that. I like it just as it comes. If you want to put it in, you can, but it makes it a little bit too stiff. Just push the end through nicely. All right, now we're going to grab the back, 2 backs, like so, and on the outside, so the right side's out, tail, put it around about that dot there. This is where your clips are quite handy instead of pins. I think through this the clips do a better job. Clip him on. And if you're going to put a label on, this is the time to do that too. If I can find mine, wherever it's gone. Had it here somewhere. there it is. Okay. And I usually put it straight above the tail at that point. What we do now, we're just going to tack these on. So down here on the machine will be fine. Now do it inside. If this is the seam allowance here, just do it inside the seam allowance. You don't want the stitching showing or having to make sure you get over it. So we're just going to tack down there. And then we're going to put these two together and sew all the way through from top to bottom, back stitch both ends. So we'll go around and get that done and come back for the next step. So now that's sewn down the back seam. The next thing we're going to do on both the front and the back is put a row of stay stitching just within that seam line. So open out that back seam, and we're going to sew machine stitch just inside that seam line across here and across here. So we'll come back. That will help you. That'll help it not stretch, number one. And number two, this is where we're going to leave the opening for stuffing, and it will also give you somewhere to sew up the hand sew up the opening. So just inside that sewing line. On both pieces, probably can't see it here, but there is a stitching line I've gone across there, just on the inside. So you can probably see it better from the outside. So just straight across here. And when that folds down, you do that right on the fold. It'll fold nicely and neatly to the inside. And our little hand stitches will go on this side of it. So all the way across on both front and back. And next we need to cut out the shorter the legs, so the front legs or arms. So I'll do that one there. Now carefully you can clip into these without clipping the stitching. Just give it enough so the fabric can stretch nicely around there and into the wrist area, anywhere where there's a sharp turn. I've only cut one side at a time because I don't want to risk nipping those seams or the stitching. So like so, we're going to pull this through the same way, just push a bit in there. So what we're going to do now is we're going to put a little bit of stuffing in the foot part, hand part, whatever you want to call it, because we're going to top stitch this one across here. So we've got a little wrist. So it doesn't need a lot of stuffing. And once again, these little hemostats are pretty good for that. Inside, stuff it into the little finger area. Now this is where you're going to use your zipper foot on your sewing machine. And I'll take the normal one off. Now if I was going to try and sew a row of top stitching straight across here like so, with the ordinary foot, it's very, if I run it up close to the stuffing, my sewing line is actually going to end up out here. So it's very hard to get close. If you use a zipper foot, I've moved everything here and I've lost it. Must have moved it over to my machine. Yes, I have. So with a zipper foot, the needle's going to go down right here in this hole. So in the little hole there, there's where the needle goes down. And so your needle's going to get nice and close to that stuffing. Now I'm going to put this on the machine, top stitch across here, and I'm going to leave both tails quite long. So we'll do that. We'll come back and have a look at that. So I don't want a back stitch. We'll tie those tails off. So there we go there, like so. Now we're going to tie these off into knots here, and then we will thread up our long darner with the tails. Now you can leave this all to the last and keep going with making your cat. It's probably easier when we've got the rest of the arm stuffed. You've got a little bit more choice, but the principle is just thread those tails through and go into where the stuffing is, very close to where you've done your knot, through into the stuffing. Now once again, this might be, I've pushed down on the table, might be hard, might be slippery fingers, you might be able to do it. Grab your needle nose pliers and gently wash those through. Now if you pull that thread tight and clip close without cutting the fabric, so you don't have to be overly close, clip it. It will then flip back to the inside and go into the stuffing, and you've got a neat edge or end of your stitching. So what we're going to do, we'll do those in all four legs. We'll do that, and then we'll come back to do the placement. So now we've got all the little hand stuffed and the top stitching done here. We're going to very lightly stuff the arms up to the top. So I think they're a little bit too short to bother putting elbows in, but if you really wanted to, you could do the same as we're going to do to the other legs. And push it nicely into these little corners in here. But you don't need to overstuff and make it too hard. So we'll put that in here. And when we get to the top, just to keep it all together, make it easier to handle, I just sew straight across the top there, close-ish to the edge, so it's within the seam allowance. That's fine. Now so we'll do the other one the same. And with the back legs, we're going to stuff up to this little tacking line we've put in that area. So that's where we're going to top stitch. And I mean, you could have marked it with a pin or anything you like, but I just find the tacking is a lot easier. You don't have to worry about stabbing yourself or anything else. Very easy to pull out. It's quick to do. So once again, don't overstuff them to make them too tight. Just a nice shape will be fine. So we'll do both. Yeah, I'll go still with the zipper foot on the sewing machine. I'll go across and I'll just do one side or the other of that tacking. I'll just sew across here. Just try and miss the tacking, just makes it easier to pull it out. Leaving your long tails because you're going to tie them off in knots, just like you did with the other pieces. Any top stitching on the outside. So once again, we just top stitched across, and you can actually pull that tacking thread out now if you like. And I've probably caught a little bit of that in the stitching across I've done. But being bright pink like that, it makes it very easy to see. And I'll pull that tail out in a minute without trying to pull out the stitches you've just put in there that you want to keep there. So that's caught, so I'll just grab so then we'll stuff up to the top just like the front arms, and once again not too tight. And then and we'll also just sew the opening closed just across the top within the seam allowance area. So we're going to do a row of stitching just across here. I'll do that on all four and come back. Now we've got the legs all done, knee joints done, the threads all and the tails knotted off and pushed through into and hidden in the stuffing. So they're all ready to go. So now we're going to put the smaller of the front arms on. So roughly the collar will go around in that line there, like so. So we want to be able to hide the arm where they go on within that line. Now we won't be able to use clips here, well, not easily anyway. So we're going to tack these or sew a line of stitching for these arms. Just line up to where you want them. You might want them, oh, get the right one. You might want them straighter, bendier, whatever. Then that gets hidden under its collar. So I'm probably going to have mine about there. I'll go across, sew that on. Tails. Now when I did this, laid out the front embroidery and cut the body out, I didn't really take well into account exactly where the collar was going to go. So I'm not going to fuss too much. That's about the middle there. What we're going to do here is we're going to top stitch close to both edges, which will enclose where the arms have been attached. So along here and along here on the machine. It will cover up a little bit of the heart, but that's fine. I don't have a problem with that. It was a little bit large anyway, but I thought I'd use it. So we'll go across and do that next. And what we'll do with these whiskers, because when we want to put together, they might get in the way. With the 32 gauge wire, jewellery wire, they'll actually roll up really nicely, and you can just scrunch them up there while you're doing the last bit of the sewing. But with these cords, no, they're a little bit bouncier, so you can put a little bit of tape around them and just tape them on there out of the way so they don't get caught, because when you put the front and the body back together, they may get caught. So we'll just do that. I'm just going to go and sew across here and across here. And then come back. So now that's top stitched across both bottom and top of the collar, through here and through here. We can now take the tacking stitches out. Can't remember whether we went right around there. Some little pieces in here. So it's all that out. And we want to do the mouth now. You could save it till later, but the thing about doing the mouth now is you can actually knot and sew off much easier than when the cat's finished. So I'm going to use the crochet thread, crochet cotton, and I'm going to use my long darner. Just gives me a little bit extra. And what you can do is make a knot, or, whoops, one thread of that pulled on there. In that, the I-band colour, because that's not attached at that point. It's only attached really around the rims of the eyes and maybe across the, and that can be just tied off on there, and that will start it off, and we'll leave it. So we're going to bring your needle out where the nose, make sure your little nose is straight. In my nose I've got a little dent through the centre there, so I will come up, I'll try to, up right at the bottom where that is on the nose. Now I'll do a short little down, go back in. And this is where you can play with the shape of the mouth. Now if you use pins and maybe something like our woolen board, you can just put your pins in and wrap your thread round till you get a mouth shape you like. I'm just going to do a very simple little one here. And this is where we can use our heat pencil if you want to, pen. Make sure they're exactly the same distance away. So something like that there. And at the same distance over there. You could get good and get the ruler out and measure them. I'm going to say that's close enough there. So up through one. And don't over tighten, but pull it firmly. Back down the middle where you've the bottom of the bit. Down to this little dot. And with the crochet thread, once around's enough. You don't need to go twice round or anything. I think that is sufficient. So now, because we've got it, we can actually go and knock that off to the start tail. And we don't have to worry about trying to hide threads, hide ending bits, or securing it off. And it's a very simple little bit of sewing or embroidery. So it's not, well, cut those, and we've got our mouth done. Obviously looks fun with this whiskers stuck wherever. We might stick those down there now. Now what we're going to do now is back legs we'll leave till later, till last, and we're going to pin, or I might use the clips. Now the best way of doing this is actually, so it won't get in the way of your sewing machine, the posts, if you sew with that up. If you sew with it down, it pushes around, but if you sew with it up, they don't get in the way. So we'll attach all this around here, we'll clip it. I'll just do it roughly, quickly. And we're going to sew around. What you could do with this collar, you could trim it now to the shape of the front body. It was made oversized on purpose. So down there, it won't get in your way now. You can see what you're doing. So line up all your little bits and pieces. And then we're going to sew all the way around from the bottom, the way around here, up here, across here, down and down to this side, leaving the bottom open. So that's what we've got to do next. So I'll go off and sew that and come back. Now that's sewn all the way around. Now when you start your sewing, make sure you go right to the end. Don't start our stitching here, actually sew right across to here. Back stitching all the way around and right off to the end again, back stitching. So we're going to just trim these little corners off in the points through here. You can snip a little bit along here in the curves, or you could even use pinking shears along here just to make sure that stuff's out with a nice shape. In the pointy bit, the change of direction around the neck, and snip in there, and he should now be good to turn through. I'm just going to put my needle back where it belongs. push those little ears all the way through. Get a nice little point in the top. Same on the other side. Right. Now we can take the sticky tape off his whiskers. The least time you leave that on, the less risk of getting sticky on his whiskers. So it only needs to be on just enough time to get him together. Now what we're doing, because we don't want his ears stuffed, line all that up so there's no scrunchy bits underneath, flatten it out, and we're going to top stitch over that same line that we did before when we sewed the floral ear lining on. Make sure all the seams are out nicely. And once again, across here like so. Leaving tails again, we'll do the same thing, knot them into the stuffing. So we'll just leave long tails and leave them till he's finished, and we'll tie those off and lose the tails after you finish stuffing him. So I'll get that done and I'll come back. Now we've got those top stitched across. We'll tie those off and we'll wait till he's finished being stuffed before we lose those tails. Now what we've got to do is put the other legs on. So we mark the centre is there, the front and the back. If those side seams are out, you can put them on the back, the front, doesn't matter which way. So leaning him up this way, there's virtually just enough room for the side seam, a little bit extra, about 1 centimetre. We're going to sew that across, sew him on here like so. Now I would actually go across there a couple of times and really securely sew those on. Because what happens to something like this, if it was a child, they tend to carry them around by their arms and legs. So you want those legs on nice and firmly. So I'd probably go across there twice. So I'll go and do that, and Pussycat's almost finished. Alright, I've sewn those on. Now make sure you're only sewing with one part of the body, the front side of the body, and it's easy just to sew from the inside. And then you can also sew along that line, the seam line that you had marked originally, all along there. And it's much easier from the inside like that. Sew along there and you're not going to catch this. You don't want to catch the back, because we want that open to do our stuffing. So now we're going to stuff the Pussycat, and almost done. So what we'll do, our optional here is to make some toes. Like this little Pussycat here. So with our buttonhole thread, take a nice long piece, and once again with our long darner, and I'll do a relatively matching thread to your velvet. These ones are actually darker and they're fine because they don't actually make a really pale grey. So it was a medium to dark grey, and it looks fine. So what we're going to do, basically our toes are going to be about that long, about 12 mil, I guess. You can put a little dot if you wanted to. Once again with your heat pen, you could do a dot there, like on the patterns, and a dot there if you want. There we go. From the back, at that point, come up to that dot. Pull that through now, leave a tail, because we're going to tie that off. Now through the same hole, coming up at this dot here, get it in the bend where the toes go around, in the scallop, back into here, and over to where you started, just a couple of threads away. You don't want it exactly at the same hole because you want to be able to tie a knot here. So pull them in there, pull them tight, like so, and you've made some little toes. So now we'll tie that off. Oops. We'll try and tie that off. Nice and tight. And same as everything else we're doing, we lose those tails on the inside. So back in close to where the knot is, back out somewhere in the stuffing. We pull in tight. Snip the thread, do not snip the fabric. There's his toes. You can do, thread your needle up, get rid of that tail the same way. Now to get rid of those markings, just go and put the iron gently near it. Doesn't take much at all, and then that's gone, those little markings. So basically now, you could go around and do the other, all four. You could just do the toes, not the fingers. We're going to stuff him up nicely. I'll just start that, then go away and finish. So obviously just take your time, get him stuffed up nicely. And he sort of comes to shape as you go along. So I'll go off and stuff him and we'll come back, and all we've really got to do is sew up the opening at the bottom. So I'll get him stuffed. So now we've got the all stuffed, and we're going to sew up down the bottom here. So with your buttonhole thread or top stitch thread, you may put a knot in the back of it. Bring up your, so bring your needle up on the outside of the stay stitching. Stay stitching is along here, so bring up your thread just to the outside of that stitching. That stay stitching is going to be our guide to sew along here. So just to start it, we're going to take a few stitches at the beginning here on each side of that, and what we're going to do is ladder stitch along here. So sort of fold it where the side seam is. You fold in the back, and it's got to meet, where it's going to meet is over the stitches of the leg. And we're going to take a stitch either side. So we're going to take one stitch along here. If you find that pulling away, this is another place where the hemostats can be quite useful. I'll just stop for a moment. Back seam meets right between the legs there. What you could do, I do have a smaller pair which might be the way to go, but oops. Just while you're starting, that's actually pulling away from you because of the stuffing in there. So we've taken one stitch on the back of the fabric, and I'll use it, call it the legs, and then we'll go on the legs. We'll take a stitch on that side and come across back onto the back fabric, exactly parallel the same spot where you came out on the other side. A stitch there, back over to the legs, another stitch we're going to take, back to the back fabric. So now what you've got, why it's called ladder stitch, if we look at that, the stitches look like a ladder. They're all parallel. So we've taken a stitch here and the same over the other side, straight in line from where you came out, you take the stitch on that side. Where you've come out, over this side, parallel. So straight across, and so this is why it's called ladder stitch. When you've taken a few stitches, hold it in so you haven't got too much pressure on there, and you can pull that thread and the stitches disappear. So it's a very neat way of sewing up an opening. So basically I'm going to keep going along here, all the way along, and we finished that one. I'll go back to that. So the other thing is we've got a few little loose threads here, the ears, so we'll tie them off. Oh, I think I've already done a few knots here. Oh. And not cooperating. Those whiskers are in the way. About 3 knots will be fine. Thread back up into your long darner. And we'll lose. And back into the head, go in very close to where you tied the knot. And sometimes it can be a bit tough. Grab the tips with your pliers, pull that out. Now pull it away from your face, because if you slip, that could fly straight into your face. Pull the thread tight, cut those, and it loses inside there. So now we've got a few tidying up jobs, the little whiskers. You want to cut those and decide whether you want long whiskers, short whiskers, medium length. I might go about there. And same on the other side. Grab him and try to even him up. If you pick a spot. And what you can also do with the whiskers, if you run your fingers along them, you can curl them, fingernails, they'll curl. So you can play with them however you like and neaten them all up. Like I said, all I've got to do is sew along the bottom, finish sewing along the bottom there, and there's our little cat done. Well done, everyone.